Your daughter had the biggest tech wedding of 2022. The reporter told Mom at her book club. 280 guests at the plaza. Dad dropped his coffee. I smiled at the cameras. My real family was there, all the people who supported my journey. The interviewer showed them the reception photos. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. My phone started vibrating against the steel surface of the server rack. Once. Twice. Then, a continuous, angry hum. I didn't pick it up. I didn't even glance at the caller ID. I knew exactly who it was. The notifications were piling up on the lock screen like digital debris, missed calls from my mother. Frantic texts from my father. A barrage of question marks from my sister. Ashley. Inside the climate-controlled silence of the Fortress Sec data center. Their panic felt distant. Irrelevant. For 28 years, my silence had been interpreted as weakness. They thought I was quiet because I was afraid. They thought I was reclusive because I was socially awkward. But silence isn't always a retreat. Sometimes, it's a strategy. It's what we call an air gap in cybersecurity, physically isolating a secure network from unsecured ones to prevent infection. My family was the virus. My silence was the firewall. I built my life, my company, and my entire identity behind that wall, knowing that the moment I opened a port, they would drain everything. So I let the phone buzz. I watched the little light blink, signaling another voicemail I would never listen to. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I felt the cool, humming precision of a system working exactly as designed. They weren't angry because they missed my wedding. They were angry because they realized they had lost access to an asset they didn't even know they had. And for the first time in my life, I controlled the encryption key. I turned the phone face down and went back to work. The code on my screen was elegant, logical, and fair. Unlike my family, it didn't play favorites. It didn't care about appearances. It just executed the command. And today, the command was simple: deny access. To understand why I didn't invite them, you have to understand the economics of the house I grew up in. I don't mean the mortgage or the utility bills. I mean the economy of attention, validation, and investment. In the grand ledger of the family, my sister Ashley was an asset to be inflated, and I was a liability to be minimized. My parents, Jeffrey and Cynthia, were obsessed with the optics of success. Ashley was their show pony. She was beautiful, loud, and desperate for fame, which they interpreted as ambition. When she was 22, she decided she was a lifestyle consultant. She had no clients, no experience, and no business plan. But she had Jeffrey's checkbook. They poured $200,000 into her startup. They rented her a studio in the Mission District. They paid for a launch party that cost more than my entire college tuition. They bought her followers. They bought her press releases. They essentially bought her a career that didn't exist. They treated her vanity project like a Fortune 500 IPO. Meanwhile, I was the paranoid one. That's what Jeffrey called me. I was obsessed with code, with encryption, with the invisible architecture that keeps the world running. When I asked for a $5,000 loan to buy my first dedicated server rack, Jeffrey laughed. He actually laughed. He told me he wasn't going to throw good money after bad on a glorified video game addiction. So I left. I didn't storm out. I didn't make a scene. I just packed my bag and drove my beat-up sedan to a co-location center in San Jose, where I rented a cage for my hardware. For 6 months, I lived out of that car. I showered at a 24-hour gym. I ate protein bars and drank lukewarm coffee. I coded until my eyes burned, and my fingers cramped. I built Fortress Sec in the dark. I built it on hunger. I built it because I had no safety net. No backup plan. And absolutely no one coming to save me. And that's when I realized the truth about my parents. They didn't just neglect me, they inadvertently engineered their own obsolescence. By giving Ashley everything, they crippled her. They solved every problem before she could feel the weight of it. They smoothed every road so she never learned to walk on uneven ground. They fed her ego until it was too heavy for her to carry on her own. They didn't raise a CEO, they raised a dependent. But me. By starving me. They forced me to learn how to hunt. By mocking my interests. They ensured I never sought their validation for my ideas. By refusing to invest in me. They guaranteed that I would own 100% of my equity. They thought they were punishing me with their neglect. They thought they were putting me in my place. But in reality, they were giving me the greatest competitive advantage of my life. They removed the one thing that kills potential faster than failure: comfort. Ashley is 31 years old and still asks Cynthia for rent money. I'm 28. And I just bought a competitor for cash. The architecture of their neglect became the blueprint of my empire. And looking back, I almost want to thank them. If they had loved me the way they loved her, I might have turned out just as helpless. The apology never came. There was no, "We're so proud." No, "We didn't know." No, "Let's start over." When the shock of the reporter's video wore off, my parents didn't feel regret. They felt robbed. By noon the next day, the narrative had shifted. Cynthia didn't call to ask how I was. She sent a series of voice notes that grew progressively more unhinged. I listened to them on double speed while reviewing quarterly projections. Her voice was sharp, breathless, with the specific kind of rage that comes from social embarrassment. She wasn't mad that I hadn't told her. She was mad that I had made her look foolish in front of the Atherton Book Club. "You have humiliated this family," she hissed in the first recording. "Do you have any idea what people are saying? They think we're estranged. They think we're bad parents. You need to issue a statement immediately. Morgan, you need to tell them this was a misunderstanding. That we were traveling. Fix this." She didn't care about the wedding. She cared about the narrative. Then came Jeffrey. My father. The lawyer. The man who cared more about billable hours than birthdays. He didn't send voice notes. He sent a formal email to my personal address with the subject line, "Audit of Family Assets." I opened it, expecting a lecture. What I found was a demand. He wrote that since I had lived under his roof during the early stages of my hobby, he was legally entitled to a percentage of the intellectual property developed during that time. He claimed that the electricity I used, the internet connection I borrowed, and the emotional support provided by the family constituted seed capital. He wasn't asking for a relationship. He was laying the groundwork for a lawsuit. He wanted equity. It was laughable. It was legally baseless. But it was also clarifying. They weren't family. They were shareholders in a failed venture, trying to claw back value from a spin-off they had ignored. But the worst part wasn't the direct attacks. It was the noise they generated in the background. By evening, my phone was lighting up with texts from cousins and aunts I hadn't spoken to in a decade. The whisper campaign had begun. Morgan. "Did you really steal Jeffrey's retirement fund to start your company?" my Aunt Linda texted. "Your mother is devastated. She says you embezzled money from Ashley's trust." That was their play. They couldn't admit they had neglected me, because that would make them the villains. So they invented a crime. In their version of the story, I wasn't the genius who built something from nothing. I was the thief who stole their resources to get ahead. They projected their own greed onto me. They needed me to be a criminal, so they could justify their hostility. I looked at the messages. the lies spreading like a virus through the family tree. A younger version of me would have tried to debunk them. I would have sent receipts, bank statements, timestamps. I would have screamed the truth until my throat bled. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I was a CEO who dealt with hostile actors for a living. You don't argue with vampires standing at your gate. You don't invite them in. And you certainly don't try to explain the concept of blood to them. You starve them. Jeffrey sent a follow-up email an hour later. We need to meet. In person. To settle the distribution of shares, and discuss your sister's compensation for the distress you've caused. Tomorrow. My office. He wanted to summon me like a recalcitrant associate. He wanted to pull me into his world of mahogany desks and intimidation tactics. He wanted to play the father one last time. I typed a reply. 2 sentences. We will meet. But not at your office. I hit send. If they wanted a business meeting, I would give them one. But they were about to learn that in my boardroom, I didn't negotiate with terrorists. The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. At Fortress Sec, I sent a car for them. Not out of courtesy, but out of control. I wanted them to arrive on my timeline. In a vehicle I had vetted, driven by a security detail I trusted. I watched them arrive on the monitor. Cynthia stepped out first, adjusting her Chanel jacket, looking around the sleek, unmarked building with a mix of confusion and disdain. Jeffrey followed, carrying a briefcase that probably contained his frivolous lawsuit drafts. Ashley trailed behind, glued to her phone, probably checking if the hashtag Morganstone reveal was trending yet. They expected a startup office with beanbags and free beer. What they walked into was a fortress. Retinal scanners, air-gapped elevators, walls of reinforced glass that could turn opaque at the touch of a button. My assistant, Leo, met them in the lobby. He didn't offer them water. He handed them non-disclosure agreements. Standard procedure for all visitors, Leo said, his voice polite but firm. Ms. Stone requires these signed before entry is granted. I watched Jeffrey bristle. He tried to argue, invoking his legal background. Blustering about coercion, Leo simply waited. He didn't engage. He knew, as I did, that curiosity and greed would win. They signed. When the elevator doors opened on the top floor, I was waiting in the boardroom. The glass walls were set to clear, revealing the panoramic view of Silicon Valley, the kingdom they had never believed I could conquer. I stood at the head of a table made of reclaimed black walnut, flanked by my own legal team and Alexander, who sat quietly to my right. They walked in, and the dynamic shifted instantly. In their living room, I was the daughter who disappointed them. Here, I was the CEO who could buy and sell them. Morgan. Cynthia started, her voice pitching up into that fake socialite warmth she used when she wanted something. This is impressive. Why all the security? We're family. Sit down, I said. I didn't smile. I didn't offer a hug. I pointed to the 3 chairs on the opposite side of the table. Jeffrey threw his briefcase onto the table with a thud. Cut the theatrics. Morgan, we're here to talk about fairness. You built this company using resources provided by this family. We supported you when you had nothing. It's time to settle the account. I looked at him. Really looked at him. For years, I had seen a giant. Now, I just saw a man in an ill-fitting suit trying to bully a hurricane. Fairness, I repeated. Let's talk about fairness. I pressed a button on the console in front of me. The smart glass wall behind me darkened and then lit up with a projection. It wasn't a PowerPoint. It was a forensic audit of their finances. This I said, pointing to the screen, is a detailed analysis of your current financial standing, the second mortgage on the Atherton house, the maxed out credit lines, the failed investments in Ashley's brand. You're not here because you think you're entitled to my company. Jeffrey, you're here because you're broke. The silence in the room was absolute. Cynthia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Ashley looked up from her phone, her eyes wide. Jeffrey went pale, his bluster evaporating instantly. How did you? He stammered. I'm a cybersecurity CEO. I said, data is my currency, and yours is bleeding red. Then, I pressed the button again. The screen changed. This time, it showed a book cover, The Code Breaker, by M. J. Stone. And this, I continued, looking directly at Cynthia, is the book you were holding at your club yesterday. The one you've been telling all your friends is a masterpiece of modern biography. You've quoted M. J. Stone at dinner parties. You've called her a genius. Cynthia nodded slowly, confused. Yes, it's brilliant. But what does that have to do with? I am M. J. Stone. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She slumped back in her chair. The daughter she had ignored, the failure she had hidden away, was the very author she had been worshipping to gain social capital. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. You read my book. Mom, I said, my voice quiet but cutting. You loved the protagonist? You cried over her struggle. You just didn't realize the villain in the story was you. Cynthia started to cry. Not the fake, manipulative tears she used to get her way, but real tears of shock and shame. But Jeffrey wasn't done. He wasn't capable of shame. Only calculation. Fine. He spat. So you're successful. You're famous. That doesn't change the law. I supported you. I have rights. I looked at my lawyer. Sarah. She slid a thin file folder across the table to Jeffrey. That, I said, is a record of the loan application you submitted 3 years ago. The one where you used my social security number without my consent. Attempted identity theft. Jeffrey. Federal fraud. Jeffrey stared at the file. His hands started to shake. I didn't. I was going to pay it back. It doesn't matter, I said. The attempt is the crime. I blocked it because I monitor my credit like I monitor my networks. But I kept the record. Just in case. This is blackmail, Ashley screeched, finding her voice. You're blackmailing your own father. No, I said calmly. Blackmail is demanding something you haven't earned. This is leverage. And I'm using it to buy the only thing I want from you. What Jeffrey whispered. What do you want? I want you gone. Gone, Cynthia echoed, her voice trembling. What does that mean? It means we're done, I said. It means I'm buying you out of my life. I nodded to Sarah, who handed each of them a thick envelope. Inside, I explained, is a receipt for a donation of $1 million, made in your names, to the Forgotten Futures Foundation. They tore open the envelopes. I watched their faces fall as they saw the charitable donation receipts. They were expecting a payout, a settlement, a golden parachute for their failures. This organization, I continued, provides technology education, mentorship, and mental health support to children in the foster system, children who have been neglected, children who have been told they don't matter. A donation, Jeffrey stammered. But The money. The money is gone. I said. I donated it. You get the tax write-off. That's it. You gave away $1 million, Ashley whispered. Horrified. That was our money. It was never your money. I corrected her. It was my money. And I used it to help kids who actually deserve it. Kids who know what it's like to be invisible. I stood up. This donation is public. The press release goes out in 10 minutes. The Stone family donates $1 million to help neglected youth. You can either smile and pretend you're generous, or you can complain and look like monsters. Your choice. You can't do this. Cynthia wept. We're your parents. You were my biological donors. I said, and my landlords, and my bullies. But you stopped being my parents a long time ago. I pressed a button on the remote, and the screen changed one last time. It showed a video clip. My wedding. The toast. On the screen, Alexander stood with a microphone, looking at me with adoration. To Morgan, he said in the video. The woman who built a kingdom from silence. The woman who taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about who holds the flashlight while you're building in the dark. To the family we choose. The camera panned to the crowd. My mentors. My team. My friends. People of every race, age, and background. Raising their glasses. Cheering. Wiping away tears. My real family. I paused the video. That's my family. I said to the people in the room. And you're not in the picture. I walked to the door. Alexander stood up and joined me, his hand on the small of my back. Morgan. Wait, Jeffrey called out. Desperation in his voice. Please. We can fix this. I turned back one last time. No. Jeffrey. I said. You can't patch a system that was designed to fail. You have to reboot. And I just did. I walked out of the boardroom, leaving them in the glass box of their own making. I walked through my office, past the humming servers, past the team of brilliant engineers who respected me for my mind, not my utility. I walked out to the car where Alexander was waiting. He opened the door for me. You okay? He asked. I'm perfect, I said, and as we drove away, leaving the Silicon Valley skyline behind us, I pulled out my phone. I went to my contacts. I selected Mom, Dad, and Ashley, and one by one, I hit delete, block, silence. The peace was absolute. If you've ever had to build your own empire in the dark just to keep it safe from the people who should have protected you, share your story below. You are the architect of your own peace.